far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha, everyone. This is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you.
Let's have a holiday in paradise again. Far below, drove through the snow. I barely made the plane. Didn't sleep a wink, ordered another drink, and stared out the window pane. Wheels touched down, beach bound, posted up in our chairs. As I look out at the bay, saw the palm trees sway, smell of flowers in the air. Let's have a holiday in paradise again. Just wanna celebrate with family and friends. And when it's cold out, we'll make another plan to spend. Another holiday in paradise again.
Hey, aloha, everyone, and welcome to the first Nobody Knows Your Story episode of 2025. Now, we just heard Iration perform Holiday in Paradise, kind of appropriate for this time of year. Mid-podcast, we're going to hear Pualena, and that's a really nice love song from Josh Totofi. Today's guest, let's just say her life story, like many, is unique. Now, Deborah LeBlanc, well, her story is going to kind of cause us as listeners to reflect maybe on our own life's journey. Many times in life, well, it's a roller coaster, right? It's ups and downs, and it's how we, I guess, adapt or move on from the experiences that have happened in our lives that kind of really define us. And Deborah's, well, her story is just really just a whole lot of ups and downs and how she has decided to move forward. So Deborah, welcome to Nobody Knows Your Story.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I mentioned in past episodes that I send out a questionnaire to the guests before I sit down and talk with them. That helps me out. And as I read through your responses to that questionnaire, it just, once again, like I said, it's just an example of somebody who's had those ups and downs in life and how you have adapted and moved forward.
It wasn't easy because for a while it felt like there were more downs than ups, but you just take whatever life brings you and hopefully make it through another day, and paying attention to your environment, paying attention to opportunities that may come up to change your life story. You know, when you're raised a certain way, that doesn't mean you have to live in that environment for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you have to follow any particular parental guidance, which mine, I was raised by an abusive mother, emotionally and physically abusive. And I could have cried victim for the rest of my life. That would have been a lot of people use it as a meal ticket. I chose not to. I figured I was put on this planet for a reason, and it was for a lot more than just being her punching bag. I heard things as a child like, I hate you and wish you were dead. One particular incident, just to show you the level of emotional torment she put me through. I was very close to my dad. He lived in the same town, and I always knew where to find him. And he was my best friend. And one afternoon, she was hunting. She was always hunting him up for money. And we went to his shop where he was working. And she said, I want you to go over there and tell him I need $2,000 for braces for your sister's teeth. And if he refuses to give you that money, I want you to tell him you're not a father, you're a son of a bitch. And my jaw just dropped and I stared at her. I was in shock. I couldn't conceive ever telling my father that. She must have read the look on my face because she grabbed my arm. We were sitting in a car. He was ahead, probably about 500 feet. She grabbed my arm and she dug her fingernails into my arm and she said, and if you don't say it exactly the way I told you, I'll kill you. I was shaking. I was just shaking. I was in torment. I didn't know how was I going to deal with this. And when she said, I'm going to kill you, let me tell you something. Those were not idle words. She'd come close quite a few times in the beatings that I'd received. And when I told my father that, because she had the window down on her side of the car so she could hear the conversation, she wanted me to say it loud enough to make sure that she heard it. And when I said those words, I had never in my life seen my father's face just drain of blood the way it did in that moment. And he blinked and he looked at me and he glanced over at her car and he just turned around and he walked away. My heart felt like it had just been ripped out of me. Here was my dad, who I adored, and I'd hurt him. I could see the hurt. And he understood it was her. He understood that. He didn't understand the gravity of what she'd been doing, how severe the beatings were getting, or what she had said to make me say those words. And it wasn't until much later in life when I had a chance to talk to him and tell him, Dad, you remember that time? I'm sorry that I had to say that. And he goes, I understand where that came from. You have nothing to apologize for. I know where it came from. I just sobbed, and I was in my 30s at that time. It haunted me until I had a chance to talk to him and knew that it was okay with him, that he understood what had happened. And I didn't go into the gory details. He didn't need to know it. My mother had already passed away. Nothing could have changed. When you have a narcissistic parent, or abusive parent, and an abusive parent like my mother, it's not something you're going to change. You can't change their personality. There's nothing I could say that, well, I wish I would have gone back and done X, Y, Z. I understood she was a sick person. I just had to deal with this sickness and its effect on me and protect my brother and my sister until my time with her was done. I got married at 16 years old. I had my first child at 18. And it wasn't until I had my second daughter that I began to realize I had married a male version of my mother. He wasn't physically abusive, but he was emotionally and verbally abusive. This is something that I was going to school at the same time I was trying to raise kids. He couldn't hold down a job. So I was going to school, working part-time, raising kids, trying to keep a family together, trying for the children not to see the ugliness, the ugly part of him, at least so that they would have a sense of what a father was supposed to be like. But he didn't have a clue how that worked. He had no clue as to what a father should have been like, how he should have reacted to his children in certain situations. He wanted to be their friend. He didn't understand what being a father meant. So after my third daughter was born, It wasn't until she turned 17 that I decided it was enough was enough. I had gone my own way. At that time, I was traveling pretty extensively. I had opened my own company. It was time for the craziness to end, so I divorced him and went about my merry way. And not long after that, my youngest daughter, we found out my youngest daughter was pregnant. Fortunately, she didn't marry the jerk that was the father. I told her, I said, this is not, I mean, we live in the South, but this is not 1950. You don't have to marry anybody. I'll help with the baby. And the baby was born. She was the most beautiful child on the planet. Of course, she was my granddaughter. She had, she wasn't able to speak. She had her own little noises, and she had her own way of communicating with you. She was autistic, and it didn't matter to me that she was autistic. She became the love of my life. She was just the most precious child. And 1 month after her third birthday, she passed away. My daughter called home. We lived about 10 minutes apart. And she called, and I couldn't understand what she was saying. She was in hysterics. And I just heard her say my granddaughter's name. And that's all it took. I said, I'm coming. I must have done 120 miles an hour, whatever my car pushed. I pushed it and wound up there within a matter of just a couple of minutes. And there was my grandbaby laying on a rug on the living room floor, as still as could be. And that wasn't her. The moment she'd hear the door open and she'd hear my voice, she would scramble and waddle over to me. She was very close to me, but she was just laying there still. And I just told my daughter, I said, have you called 911? She said, twice. I said, get them on the phone, call again. And I picked up the CPR. And I think one of life's cruelest things is that when you're doing CPR on a baby, or on anyone, I suppose, but when you're doing it on an infant and you're blowing into their mouth, you see their little chest rise, and there's a flutter of hope that goes through you. But the moment you stop breathing and that little chest falls flat and nothing else happens, it was just too much for me to deal with. The ambulance finally showed up, and of course, she had been dead for about 3 hours in her crib, or my daughter had found her in her crib. So that loss ripped my world apart. It just seemed to rip my soul in half. 4 months later, I'm about to fly out to Colorado, and I'm in my driveway in my car, and I get a phone call. My youngest daughter, her mother, my granddaughter's mother, had been in a fiery car crash and passed away. She had died. And I just remember screaming in the car, you can't do this to me. You can't do this to me. And of course, I was talking to whoever the hell was listening. You can't do this to me. Those were some very, very tough times. And then a year later, I lost my middle daughter to alcoholism. Everything in her body just shut down. And actually, that was pretty cruel because she was doing so well. She was in AA. She had been sober for 9 months. Then her sponsor committed suicide. And that sent her over the edge. It sent her into relapse. And when she went into relapse, she went hard. And so much so that she just fell into a coma, and her kidneys, pancreas, everything was just started shutting down one after the other. And I was in the ER. My oldest daughter had called and to tell me that she'd found my middle daughter unconscious, and they'd rushed her to the hospital. And so I'd met them there, and we were in this little waiting area. She was in ICU, and I heard them call code blue and her room number. Now you hear code blue called on television, and you're thinking, oh my God, especially if it's a main character, oh my God, it can't be that character. When it's your family, when it's your daughter, the feeling is indescribable. So I lost her a year after my youngest daughter. And then it was just dominoes from there. My dad passed away a year and a half after that, followed by my youngest brother who died of lung cancer. I was there when he passed away. All of that, it was a lot of drama, a lot of trauma. I was in the business world. I had created my own company. Trying to work and take care of all this was really felt like an insurmountable mountain. I just wanted to be left alone. I didn't want to be on this earth anymore. To be honest, I didn't want to live anymore. At one point, it was like being in a boxing ring and just getting hit over and over again, and you don't even have time to put your arms up to protect your face. You're getting boxed and hit over and over again. After all that death, I just looked at, I sold my company, and I thought, there's got to be more to life than just death. There has to be more to life than just the suffering that I've seen, just this pain. There's got to be. I started searching, what is my purpose on this planet? Certainly, you did not put me on this planet just to go through one pain after the other, after the other, after the other. I mean, what kind of cruel creator would that make you? And that's not supposed to be the case. This is not what I was taught. But I said, my life is becoming living proof of something, and I don't know what that is. So I need a direction. I need to know, what am I supposed to do? Am I ever going to be happy, or am I going to keep losing the people I love? Do I just become a nun, a hermit? What do you want from me? It wasn't long after, it was just by the weirdest coincidence. I went back to school, and I wound up getting my master's in mind body psychology. Went to HMI, which is Hypnosis Motivational Institute. It's the first accredited university for hypnotherapy. They were the first accredited in the US, and went there for 2 years and became a clinical hypnotherapist. And so my joy, my life now has been helping other people who've gone through similar situations, who go through stress, anxiety, you name whatever they put out there, whatever label they've given anybody, I will see them. I will do my very best to help them. Fortunately, I'm in the midst of all of that, going to school and finding the purpose in my life. I met the joy of my life, who's my husband now, the most wonderful man, most supportive human being on the planet. So I'm finally understanding what joy is in life, what happiness is. I laugh a lot easier these days, whereas before I was so shy, I couldn't even eat in a restaurant alone because I was concerned people were looking at the way I was eating and was going to judge me. I always could hear my mother's voice in the back of my ear: sit up straight, don't put the napkin there, it goes over your knee, blah, blah, blah. I was too shy to even go there. But as I started growing into myself, I found that life has a lot to be joyful about,
So
and it has a lot of joy in it.
Yeah. So, Deborah, first of all, I just got to say, I'm really sorry that you had to go through all those things. I knew about this, of course, because like I say, we've visited a little bit. I've read your questionnaire responses, and man, my heart just goes out to anyone who's had these kind of tragedies in their life. But like I said earlier, life is it's the ups and downs. It's the kind of that roller coaster, but it's how you respond to that. And as I listened, I mean, you spoke there for about 15, 20 minutes, and it's kind of strange to encapsulate your entire life in like 50 to 20 minutes. But in you doing that, I just kept listening to really just one tragedy after another, but then how you responded to that and how you kind of picked yourself up and moved forward. And that's what successful people do. And I'm so happy to hear that you have found a wonderful man in your life, that you've been able to now, like you say, find joy and purpose. And let's kind of talk a little bit about some of the things that you've done also, because I mean, as I was reading through this, I'm like, you talked about that freshman English teacher and talking about how you were going to write an article for a magazine. He said, well, I never did that, but I did publish 26 books. I'm like, what? Take a second and just talk about that. Publish 26 books. What's that all about?
Well, that was a kind of a serendipitous event. I woke up one morning brushing my teeth and I thought, I think I'm going to write a book. So I wrote a book, and it took me about, maybe 45 days to write it. And after I wrote it, I thought, okay, now what? I didn't write this puppy to just put it in a drawer and have it collect dust. Everything I do's got to have a meaning to it. It's got to have some kind of purpose to it. Other than that, it's what's the point? I started looking at, all right, how do I get this published? And as I was doing research, I found, well, you have to have a New York agent in order to get a New York publisher. And here I was in Louisiana. So I said, well, okay, let me find a New York agent. I mean, I was so naive. I didn't have a clue. So I said, let me find a New York agent. I went and got from the library the literary guide to publishers and agents. And it listed every agent in the country and what they represented, the type of work they represented. And out of that, I found 52 of them that worked with the genre I'd written. All of them requested that I sent in they were only allowed a query. I had to wait for them to respond before I could reply. I could send a request to another agent. And I'm looking at this, what they're writing here, and I'm saying, wait a second, there are 52 of them. If I've got to wait for you to respond, and it would say sometimes it may take 6 months for me to get back to you, and it takes 6 months, there's no way. I will be in a nursing home or in the cemetery by that time. So what I did was like, who's going to come and get me? The publishing police? I put together 52 packets, 52 query letters, and with sample chapters, and sent them out. Out of those 52, I got 10 responses that wanted to read my entire manuscript. They requested that I only sent them the full manuscript, but they didn't require me to sign anything agreeing to that. So I'm faced with the same situation. Here's 10 of them. All right, they want my full manuscript. So I sent 10 out. The challenge became, out of those 10, I had 5 that contacted me to represent me. And then I had to fess up and say, well, I appreciate that. There are 4 others that I'm talking to right now.
That's a good problem.
Yeah. I was able to get an agent. Within a month, I had my novel sold to a New York publisher, and it just took off from there.
It's funny. You said you wrote that book in 45 days. I wrote a book and it took me 7 years. I think that just shows you're a little bit more motivated. That was one book though, right? So now there's 26?
Yeah, there's 26. 16 of them are novels and the others are nonfiction. Especially getting into what I am into now. I've got some different perspective on things, how to retain, what techniques to use to help you hold on to memory, things like that. The series title for those books are called Make Shit Happen. The rest are novels. They were contracted by Harlequin, of all people, and Dorchester Publishing was one of the other New York houses that I was doing paranormal suspense, a lot like Dean Koontz and Stephen King type stuff. So it's very cathartic when you're writing, paranormal suspense, and your imagination gets to go wild, and you get to use all of the junk from your past to put in the book, and you can make villains look just like certain people, and you can have those villains, something really, great happen to that villain. Everybody's cheering that the villain got killed and got killed that way, splattered everywhere. It's pretty cathartic.
Island baby, you're so beautiful, you drive me crazy. You know you're all that I need, so much more. Your strength and beauty, I can see in your eyes. I lose sight of my world. Baby, love, no words can hold what's truly on my mind. Just feel the beat of my heart, and you'll know what I mean. You're my Pulena. You're so beautiful. God knows I love you. You're all I need, Pulena. Take my breath away, Pulena. You know lately, all I think about is holding you closely and never leaving your side. I'll keep you warm. Time passes by and still you're on my mind. I can't imagine living my life without you, girl. The special moments you and I can only share will always keep us together and never apart. You're my Pulena. You're so beautiful. God knows I love you. You're all I need, Pulena. Take my breath away, Pulena. Time passes by and still you're on my mind. I can't imagine living my life without you, girl. The special moments you and I can only share will always keep us together and never apart. You're my Pulena. You're so beautiful. God knows I love you. You're all I need, Pulena. Take my breath away, Pulena. Pulena. You're so beautiful. God knows I love you. You're all I need, Pulena. Take my breath away, Pulena.
We got to go back though to you got your degree in hypnotherapy, is that right?
Clinical hypnotherapy, yes.
Clinical hypnotherapy, and that's what you're doing now is helping others through, I guess, hypnosis. Is that correct?
Hypnosis. Hmm. Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
A lot of my
just kind of talk about that a little bit.
A lot of my business now is I do a lot of keynote addresses. I started out having a basic hypnotherapy business, and I see all of my clients over Zoom because I have clients all over the country. It's kind of evolving to I do keynote addresses, workshops, of course, writing, but speaking has become a big part of what I do. The one-on-one sessions are becoming fewer as the other part of this expands. It's called LeBlanc Leadership Group, where I teach companies, especially about emotional intelligence. I deal with emotional intelligence because I understand the workings of the brain. Well, not like a neurologist would, but I understand the subconscious and conscious mind and how they interact and how we can affect other people's lives, especially those that we're responsible for, and how we can affect our own lives by being mindful of what we do, what we say, and mostly who we are. We can affect who we are.
Sure.
Um,
Is that like the power of positive thinking?
that times 1,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Norman Vincent Peale, Stephen Covey, Dale Carnegie, Zig Ziglar. Those were all my heroes, back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see Zig Ziglar. He was on stage with his son. He'd had a fall in his home down some stairs and suffered a brain injury. And he wasn't able to, his spatial distance was really affected. So when he'd walk around the stage talking, his son would have to follow him because Zig didn't know if he was going to walk off the stage or not. So his son acted as a buffer.
Mm-hmm.
Even in his 80s, he was as motivating then as he was on any cassette I'd ever heard him talk on.
Some of those folks, they just get it, and they just, their purpose is to help others. And
Yep.
all those names, I'm familiar with every name you mentioned there. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you kind of wrote down that you were a paranormal investigator.
Yes.
Now I know that you talked about that kind of in, conjunction with some of the writing, but is there anything that you're doing aside from the writing when it comes to paranormal activities or investigating or whatever you were doing?
Yes, I've hunted with teams around the country to purportedly haunted locations. I've got all of the equipment that you may have seen on some of these ghost hunting shows. I have a lot of that equipment. Other team members have other forms of equipment. So when we join together, we've got the place pretty well covered. From old abandoned insane asylums to cemeteries to jails to homes. I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere.
That's what I was just thinking of. Yeah, that's great. So I got to ask you then, because I used to believe, I didn't believe any of that stuff. I just didn't believe in ghosts or, seances, or that people could talk to people from the other side or whatever. Now I just say, I don't know. I'm open to anything. For people like yourself, and I've run into some, they tell me for sure that there are things out there that they can communicate with folks from the other side, or that have moved on or lived, previous lives. Have you had anything like that happen to you personally?
Yes, I have. And I say that reluctantly because I'm one of those doubting Thomases.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go into a location just because someone says it's haunted. I'm a doubting Thomas. But I've had too many situations where we had gone to, I'm going to give you an example. There was a show it was put out by MTV. It was teenagers, and there were like 5 girls, and they had to hook up with one guy. One guy had to choose out of those 5 girls, And so one of the adventures they were going on was to go into a haunted house. MTV contacted us and asked us if we'd bring some of our equipment there. So we did. And just kind of watch these teens just scare themselves more than anything else. But while they were filming, I kept glancing over at this man. He was pretty short for a man. He was about 5'4", real stocky. He looked to be Latino. In my mind's eye, I kept seeing a picture of this elderly lady, a short lady, kind of stocky, with a white bun in her hair. She had it pulled back, and she was speaking in Spanish and in my mind's eye, I'm not literally seeing this. This is my mind's eye. She's pointing to this big guy who is really there, saying, "This is my grandson." Now, I don't speak Spanish. I don't understand Spanish. I can say taco. That's it. But I understood her as if she was speaking English. And she was pointing out grandson. I could just had a sensation of the love that she had for him. And there was something she wanted to tell him. And I'm thinking, I'm not going, I don't know this dude. I'm going to go up to him and tell him this stuff. He's going to think I lost my mind. And so one of the other investigators was next to me. I said, "Do you know who that man is that's standing over there in that corner watching?" He was standing there with his arms folded out, kind of watching what was going on. He said, "Yes, he's the producer of the show." I went, "Oh, man. Oh, man." Like she couldn't have gotten the bellhop or something, No, it's got to be the producer of the show. I went up to him and I said, "Excuse me." And I said, "This is going to sound weird, I know. But I said, in my mind's eye, I see this elderly woman." And I just go on to explain what she's saying to me, how very proud she was of him and how much love she exuded for him. And this big man just starts sobbing. His grandmother had passed away before he had a chance for her to see that he'd been promoted to producer of the show. And he was just so grateful that she saw it now and was proud of him. That's happened to me a few times, incidents like that. Do ghosts exist? I think that Albert Einstein was on something with, I think the theory of relativity is a valid issue. I think that the time continuum has its own validity to it. And I think we just live in a wrinkle of time. And sometimes there are things that get past that veil, just peeking through that veil. And sometimes we get a chance to peek through that veil on the other side. If you've ever come across something that kind of made the hair on your arm stand up, and you're not quite sure what it is, but it's got you paying attention. Sometimes that is just someone peeking out from the other end of that other side of that veil. What that is, I really don't know, but I think that there is something greater than us, more than us, that exists.
Yeah. And I'm very hopeful. I don't profess to know anything. Having a son pass away 6 years ago, my wife and I have talked about this many times, how it would be really cool to be able to communicate or hear how he's doing or where he is. I think those are probably normal thoughts for someone who has lost a loved one, somebody close to them. But I haven't experienced anything. My wife hasn't experienced anything. But yet I do believe that there are people out there that have maybe a gift. I'm not sure if you would call it that, but maybe something that allows them to see things that I can't see or to feel things I can't feel. So I don't know how anybody can say, well, that's a bunch of hooey, because we just don't know. That's very presumptuous to be able to say that about somebody else. So I just say, I don't know. Hey, it's possible. So, and I am
Yeah.
hopeful that there's something beyond this life. And like you say, I remember
Yeah.
my son Dusty, who passed away. He said one time we were talking about what happens after you die, and he said, I watched this show on like I think he said it was like parallel worlds or universe or whatever, and we talked about that for a few minutes, and I said that's a possibility because again, with me, I just think all things are possible. I'm not going to say no to anything.
Right. I
Yeah.
think parallel world is a good way to put it. Yes.
Well, and I guess the last thing that there's two things. One of the things I wanted to talk about was that you kind of talked about now at this stage in your life, and you didn't use this word, but this is a term I use, and it's basically you said to live happily as my unique self. And I think of unique self kind of just meaning you can live authentically. And
Yes.
that's kind of what I'm doing now at this stage of my life. I'm just doing what I want to do. I believe in just being nice and kind to people, but I'm living authentically. I'm not, remember how you said when you were in the restaurant, you were self-conscious of people looking and judging you for how you were eating and things.
Yeah.
You were, you cared about what other people thought. And I'm not saying you still don't, but when you get to be my age, you care, but yeah, maybe not so much.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. All right. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about was just real quickly is your trip to Maui and what you thought about Hawaii.
Oh, Maui was so beautiful. Of course, that was in 2000, so way before the fires, which was horrific. But I was at a writers' conference, a week-long writers' conference, writers' retreat. And one thing that had stuck out to me, other than the $15 hamburger, was we were all sitting in this big conference room. And I remember this man, this huge man. I don't know if he was Samoan. Uh, is there a difference between Hawaiian and Samoan, or are they synonymous? Or
Yeah, there's a difference. Simply Hawaiian just means they're from Hawaii, and Samoan just means they're from Samoa. And then it could also have somebody be Tongan or Fijian, because those islands, when I went to school on Oahu, I had people in my dorm from all those islands. And so they're similar, like, Hawaii, aloha. Samoa would be
yeah,
talofa. So they sound very similar, but Samoans are big for sure.
this dude was massive, and he had a mane of hair that was just. I mean, it was big hair. That's the only way I know how to put it. And it was about down to his back. And when he walked, it just flowed like a lion's mane. And he got up to the front. He was wearing, it almost looked like it wasn't a skirt, but it wasn't a loincloth. It was kind of a mix between the two.
Yeah, it's called a
And he
lava
had,
lava.
okay. Yeah, he was wearing that, and dark skinned. And then he started singing this song. His voice was so deep and resounding that it caused just every hair on my body to stand at attention. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And to this, I mean, I tried finding out who is this guy. Does he have anything that's recorded? Because it was just, I'd never heard anything like it in my life, and wanted more of it.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I've never been able to find out who this guy was, or if he had recorded anything. But he was powerful. That trip was that's my biggest memory from Maui.
It's interesting. There's a lot of wonderful singers for sure that are in the islands, and as I mentioned to you earlier, before we started this, that one of the things I enjoy is sharing that music with people around the world, because it's just inspired me throughout my whole life. And some of the artists are, they've passed on now, like Israel Kamakawiwa Oli. He passed away in 1996, but I still have a lot of the people that I've actually met and people that have actually been on my podcast that are just wonderful singers and just have incredible talent. So yeah, I'm not surprised when you mention that. I don't know who you're speaking about, but it could be one of many, because there are really some talented musicians in the islands for sure.
It was amazing. It was as beautiful as the island.
Yeah.
And
So was your conference in Kaanapali, or was it down in Wailea?
Wailea.
Yeah. So when you said the conference room, I thought, well, I wonder if you were at the Grand Wailea. I just wondered that.
That was it.
Yep. That's a wonderful facility. I was just there a couple months ago, and we had some friends visiting, and we went and spent an hour just taking them through the Grand Wailea. It's just such a beautiful. I mean, everybody has their own favorites, but it's kind of my favorite resort in the islands for sure.
It is. It's amazing. I couldn't get over. I mean, I live in Louisiana. Well, what I have for a waterfront is the Gulf of Mexico, which is brown, and there you go to Maui, and the turquoise, the blue, the green of the water, depending on what time of day you're looking at it or which side of the beach you're on, and the clarity of the water just blew me away. Everything about that place just blew me away. It's beautiful.
And there's other places like that. I mean, I have not been, but I've been told that if you go to Tahiti or Bora Bora in that area, that it's very similar to Hawaii. And then I have been to Fiji and Samoa and Tonga, same thing. I thought, wow, if I close my eyes and just open them, I think I'm in Hawaii again. But so there are some similar places. But yeah, that's the way you describe that is just, it's just a magical place in terms of the beauty for sure. And then you have the aloha spirit, and then you have all the other things that come into play. So I ask people if they've been, just because I think the listeners appreciate, because not everybody's been to Hawaii, and I'm sure that there are those that don't even desire to go, but that's fine. And not everybody has their own things that motivate and inspire them. And so it's just a place that has always been a big part of my life.
It's really, I can understand why.
Well, Deborah, hey, I sure appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story. It really is a life of overcoming trauma, obstacles from a young age. When you talk about your mom and you talk about the abuse that you suffered as a young person growing up, and then to be able to, rise above that, and then rise above the tragedies that you encountered. And, when you talked about starting with your granddaughter and going through your youngest, and then your middle daughter, and then your father and your younger brother. This was all in 5 years.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's so much to deal with. And yet you were able to go on from that and have graduate from college with a master's degree, and just have an incredible professional life, author of many books. And now you're married to a wonderful man. So it's
Yes.
kind of like a happy ending there, right?
Yes. Thank heavens for that.
Yeah.
Thank heavens for that. There was a page. There was a page to turn in that book. It was. Even when you watch an action-packed movie, there has to come a time where you give the audience a chance to breathe. So I'm thinking, okay, look, this is enough tragedy. At least there was a page I was able to turn, and now I can breathe and enjoy life. I still have my oldest daughter, who's a great joy to me, and our family is very small, but it's my family.
Yep. And you know what, like you say, you talk about turning the page. I mean, everybody likes a happy ending, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm so happy for you, and happy that you're in a place in your life right now where, like you say, you're living that unique, authentic life. And that's just wonderful.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
Appreciate you telling your story. Everyone, hey, check back in 2 weeks, and we're going to have another interesting story as we continue on in 2025. Aloha, Deborah.
Aloha.
Down a little old country road not far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from.